Why did no one bother looking up when she walked into the room? Not a single chair shifted, not a single voice lowered. 12 officers sat around the long oak briefing table, screens glowing, files open, coffee steaming, and yet Emma Steele might as well have been a passing shadow. Her boots made no sound on the polished concrete floor, but it wasn't silence that kept heads down. It was habit, dismissal so practiced it felt like air. She paused by the door, her folder tucked under one arm, the insignia on her chest muted under the worn fabric of her duty jacket. She had been summoned here, and still she wasn't acknowledged. She read the room. Navy uniforms, Air Force blues, a few special ops patches. Rank didn't impress her. She had survived combat where titles meant less than instinct. But the lack of basic acknowledgement scratched at something buried and old. Not anger, not even pride. Just a memory of when she once believed walking into a room meant something. A projector hummed to life. Someone laughed at a joke about supply clerks never leaving their keyboards. Another officer made a dismissive jab about desk soldiers thinking they're battlefield assets. She heard it. They meant her without realizing she was within earshot. Or maybe they did. Maybe that was the point. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't announce herself. She crossed the room and placed her file on the table near the head seat where the base commander usually sat. A few glanced up then, but only to confirm she was putting something down, not someone worth speaking to. She waited, not stiff, not timid, just present. A captain in naval whites finally broke the stalemate by accident. He reached for a data slate and caught her eyes by mistake. He blinked once, like he'd looked into a mirror he didn't expect. He opened his mouth, maybe to ask who she was, but before he could speak, the side doors parted with a hydraulic sigh. Commander Reed entered. Heads rose immediately. Chairs straightened. Conversations cut mid-word. No one sat taller than when authority entered. Reed wasn't a man you ignored. Decorated, scarred, still carrying the posture of his SEAL days, he moved like sound followed him instead of preceded him. He saw her instantly. Not because she stood out, Emma knew how to disappear even in plain view, but because Reed looked the way predators do, at everything with purpose. Their eyes held for half a second, a quiet recognition or an assessment, hard to tell. He approached the table. No one mentioned her. No one introduced her. A few officers glanced between them, curiosity flickering at edges. Emma stepped back, allowing Reed to take his place. But before he sat, something unexpected happened. He stopped, turned toward her, and his posture shifted in a way that froze the air. He saluted her. Not a lazy acknowledgement, not a half gesture reserved for politeness. A clean, deliberate, regulation-perfect salute, the kind you give to someone whose presence outranks perception. Every spine in that room locked. Every eye snapped her direction. Hands that held pens paused midair. Someone whispered, "What the hell?" under their breath, too low for anyone but themselves, yet it felt loud in the suffocating quiet. Emma didn't return the salute, not because she didn't respect it, but because she didn't need to. Reed held it a moment longer than protocol required, then lowered his hand and took his seat. "Begin," he said. No one asked who she was after that. They simply knew, without understanding why, that she wasn't to be dismissed again. Emma took her place against the wall near the corner, not sitting, just listening. Her mind didn't wander. She absorbed every detail. The operation on-screen was codenamed North Lantern, a covert base extraction involving encrypted communications and a high-value local asset. Her inclusion now made sense. She had written half the logistical encryption protocols for the supply grid in this region, even if no one outside certain circles realized it. But that wasn't the real reason she was here. Reed wouldn't have saluted her for line work. 2 hours earlier, Emma had been in a maintenance lot helping a mechanic calibrate a drone guidance processor that had glitched during an overnight test flight. She preferred being where things broke and could be fixed by hands instead of words. The call for her to report to this briefing came in through a secure line. No subject, no sender, just a time and a location. While officers argued over extraction corridors and insurgent positions near the border, Emma saw variables they ignored. She didn't speak them aloud. She waited for the moment when silence would be the loudest voice. A colonel from Air Recon gestured at a satellite image. The blackout risk to our uplinks in the valley is low. Only one known insurgent signal jammer has been spotted in the region, and it's immobile. Emma's eyes flicked to the lower right quadrant of the image. She saw something no one mentioned, a dark cluster of terrain too deliberately avoided by the aerial sweep. Reed's gaze slid toward her for the briefest blink, as if he knew she'd seen it. He said nothing, so she said nothing. But silence had its edges. One of the logisticians, same man who made the desk joke earlier, shifted in his seat, voice confident and careless. Even if communications are hit, we've built enough redundancies. Our systems are locked tight. Emma remembered a line from a report 6 months ago about a breach attempt disguised as a software update. She had flagged it. No one above her pay grade read it, or if they had, they shrugged it off. She didn't interrupt. Yet. Commander Reed finally addressed the room. We're not here to posture. We're here to prevent a blackout incident. I want contingencies drafted, not assumptions. Someone scoffed under their breath. Emma didn't need to see who. The air itself carried arrogance like a scent. Reed turned his head slightly, his voice lower now, directed to Emma without looking at her. Do you agree with their assessment? That drew every eye again. Emma felt the weight of the moment, not a burden but a test of what silence should break for. She stepped forward, not far, just enough that her presence was unmistakable. The colonel who'd been overconfident leaned back, defensive before she spoke. There are 3 uplinks in the valley, she said steadily. There should be 4. Murmurs, someone frowned. The colonel shook his head. We decommissioned the 4th last quarter, too damaged to relay intelligence. Damaged, Emma echoed, or accessed. That landed like a dropped shell casing. No sound, yet destructive. Reed didn't move, but tension coiled around the room. What did you find? He asked her. Emma didn't embellish. A diagnostics log from last week flagged a timestamp anomaly tied to that inactive station. The log was overwritten within 12 seconds. Too clean to be accidental, too quiet to be procedural. No one challenged her. They didn't want to look incompetent in front of the commander now, but disbelief was still painted on a few faces. Emma didn't address them. She addressed the screen. The blackout won't start at uplink 3, where your intel says the jammer sits. It'll start from what you think is offline. When you reroute, you'll funnel communications through pathways they're already inside. Reed nodded once. No praise, no surprise, just acknowledgement. The room reevaluated her in real time, like they'd put on glasses for the first time and realized what they were looking at. One major cleared his throat. Who exactly are you? No answer came from her. Reed answered for her instead. She's the reason your last 2 missions didn't go dark before takeoff. You just didn't know the name attached to the fixes. Silence again, different this time, he continued. She doesn't need your recognition to do her job, but she has mine. Someone at the table muttered an apology to no one in particular. Another officer shifted like their uniform suddenly weighed more. Emma stepped back into stillness. She didn't feel vindicated. Respect offered only when someone else forces it isn't respect, it's correction. And she'd lived through worse than misjudgment. As the briefing continued, something unspoken threaded the air. The kind of awareness that changes posture before it changes minds. And beneath the logistical chatter, Emma sensed the edge of something no one had voiced yet. There was a reason Reed had brought her in without introduction. There was a reason he'd saluted before anyone else spoke. And there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. But before the day was over, they would understand why silence sometimes outranks sound. and why some wars don't begin with bullets, but with the moment someone finally looks up and sees who has been standing in the room the entire time. She thought back, just briefly, to the last time someone underestimated a blackout threat and paid in lives. The memory surfaced like breath under ice, then disappeared before it could form words. Reed called for a 15-minute break. Officers stood, stretching and whispering about revised plans and data reviews. No one brushed past her like she was invisible now, but recognition without understanding is only a half-turn of the head. As they filtered out, Reed approached. Not close enough for anyone to assume familiarity, but close enough that his voice carried only to her. "You saw it before we gave you the map," he said. She didn't deny it. "Someone left a trace where they shouldn't have. I don't overlook what tries to stay unseen." His jaw flexed thoughtfully. "You'll stay through phase 2 of planning." It wasn't a question. She gave a single nod. Reed hesitated a moment, then added something she didn't expect. "They'll respect you sooner or later, but that's not why you're here." Emma met his eyes, calm and unreadable. "I know." He held her gaze a heartbeat longer, as if trying to gauge how much she'd already realized about the unspoken reason for her involvement. She knew enough. Before he walked away, he said something no one else would ever have thought to ask. "You still carry it." Emma didn't answer out loud, but the flicker, just the faintest, of something hardened in her eyes told him she did, and that was enough. He didn't use the word ember, the classified protocol almost no one acknowledged existed, because to speak of it was to admit the system needed people like her, those who never sought titles, only outcomes. Emma stood alone in the quiet room after he left, the screen still frozen on the valley map. The shut door muted the footsteps outside. Silence settled again. This time, it didn't feel like dismissal. It felt like warning. And she knew, before the next briefing started, that blackout wasn't the only thing coming. There was something deeper layered in the silence, something she hadn't told them. Not yet. What did she see in that map that no one else dared to say out loud? The projector still glowed faintly, the last image frozen in cold light. A valley, ridgelines etched like scars, dependency routes disguised as safety corridors. Emma stood alone in that empty room, not because she was forgotten but because the silence let her think. Silence to her was not absence, it was signal. She traced the edge of the digital uplink grid with her eyes. 4 nodes should have pulsed on that screen. Only 3 were active. By design, they assumed. But assumptions built coffins faster than bullets. She had learned that long before her name was ever attached to classified files. Bootsteps approached outside. Voices drifted in, low, clipped, bristling with the unease of men who had only just realized they had misjudged the only person who could keep their lines from going dark. Emma turned away from the screen before they re-entered. The officers filed back in with stiffer posture and fewer jokes. No one looked through her anymore. They looked at her, but only sideways, like one studies a locked door they never noticed before and now wonders what's behind it. Reed came in last. He didn't address the room right away. Instead, he paused at the head of the table and looked at Emma again. Same measured stillness, same unspoken calculation. "Resume," he said. The projector shifted to a sequence of route overlays, color-coded risk assessments, regional interference sweeps. Emma didn't sit. She listened. The kind of listening that picked up on what wasn't said rather than what filled the air. A mission strategist from Intel Division cleared his throat. "Commander, based on the assessment of the inactive uplink, will initiate manual sweeps and insert a patching team post-deployment. Our main comm routes remain secure for the first phase." Emma didn't move, but the strategist glanced her way as if expecting resistance. She gave none. That unnerved him more. A different officer, a major with a polished tone, addressed Reed carefully. "Should we assign her to the comm support team? Or, His voice tapered into uncertainty when Reed didn't immediately respond. Reed didn't look at him. "She's not support," he said dryly. "She's insurance." The word slid into the room like a blade. Insurance didn't attend meetings. Insurance didn't get saluted. Something in those definitions had shifted, and everyone knew it. Emma let the term pass without visible reaction, though a small, quiet thought rippled in her mind. Insurance was applied after risk was acknowledged, not prevention, containment. They still didn't understand. The discussion continued: terrain analysis, extraction timing, asset acquisition. Emma noted key blind spots. The men and women at the table filled the air with plans, but plans rarely survived contact with intent, especially when that intent hid inside your own infrastructure. 15 minutes in, a lieutenant turned to her with the weight of forced respect stiffening his spine. "Sergeant Steele, could you clarify your concern regarding rerouting pathways in case of interference?" He didn't know her actual clearance level. He just needed to say something that resembled respect. Emma stepped forward, her voice even. "Interference doesn't start from what's active. It starts from what you think is dead. When you reroute, you don't recheck the grave. You walk past it assuming it stays buried." The lieutenant blinked. Another officer shifted uncomfortably. Someone's pen stopped moving. Emma didn't embellish. "They're not trying to jam your signal. They're trying to own it." Reed watched the faces around the table for 2 breaths before speaking. "Proceed with her recommendations as priority. Triple-run diagnostics on uplink 4 and cross-check all lateral handoffs." The strategist from earlier hesitated. "But sir, we don't currently." Reed cut him off without raising his voice. "Do it." Authority without volume always landed harder. Emma stepped back again, eyes still on the screen. It wasn't about being right. Being right didn't bring people home. Being in time did. The briefing shifted to personnel assignments. Names were listed for ground teams: overwatch, drone coverage, relay techs. Emma's name wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. She knew Reed had something else in motion, something he hadn't said aloud. When the map switched to a non-operational slide, he dismissed the officers to prepare their teams. "We continue in 4 hours," Reed said. "Be ready for revisions." Chairs scraped back. No one lingered, but no one rushed past her like before either. Recognition had turned into a silent buffer zone around her presence. As the room emptied, a voice stopped in the doorway. "Ma'am." Emma turned her head. The lieutenant who'd addressed her during the briefing stood there, trying not to look uneasy. "I didn't realize you were." He swallowed whatever excuse he'd been about to make. "If you need access to the diagnostics terminal, I can assign." "I don't need assignment," she said simply. He nodded too quickly. "Right, yes, I'll clear the channel." When he left, Reed spoke without looking at her. "They'll adjust, some slower than others." Emma didn't bother with agreement. Reed slid a secure data card toward her across the table. "You've seen the surface. That's the rest." She picked it up. The plastic felt heavier than it should. She pocketed it silently. "There's another reason we're moving now," Reed said, tone lower. "Intel picked up encrypted chatter 3 days ago. Phrase match triggered an old ghost file." Emma knew before he named it: Ember. The word wasn't spoken often. The last time it was issued was 6 years ago, on a mission that never made it into briefing logs because the blackout that followed swallowed half a team and 3 civilians. Emma had been there. Not in the field, but in the static aftermath, tracing the pieces back to where no one had looked soon enough. Reed didn't confirm or deny her statement. He just watched her carefully. "You're the only one left with clearance to interpret the original trigger phrases." The phrase wasn't about a target. Ember was never about attack. It was about exposure. Someone on their side had left a door open, intentionally or otherwise. Ember files weren't missions, they were warnings. Emma's breath came slow but controlled. There was no official debrief filed on Ember. There wasn't enough left to debrief, Reed said. The room felt heavier. She remembered voices screaming through static, a comm station flickering dead mid-transmission, the silence that followed, and then the months of tracing how it had happened, the line that led back to a decommissioned relay no one thought to monitor. History didn't repeat itself often, but it rhymed. Reed continued, I don't want history, I want prevention. Emma's gaze flicked to the now dark screen. The uplink breach isn't the objective. He gave the barest nod. It's the opening act. A low thrum under the floor signaled a generator coming online somewhere in the complex. Night's cycle would begin soon, though daylight still poured through the narrow windows, turning dust motes into faint constellations. Emma shifted only enough to indicate she was ready to act, not ready to talk. Reed studied her a moment longer. You still have the old access protocols. I do discard what isn't obsolete. That's why you're here. She left without asking for permission. No need. The data card in her pocket held the rest of the map, the one no one else would see unless she decided it mattered. Out in the corridor, the air felt colder. The hallway stretched out with doors sealed and labeled, walls bearing plaques with names of people who once held rank. She walked past them without reading. Names were weight. Weight slowed you down when you needed to move fast. She reached a secured lift that required both clearance and biometric verification. When the scanner flashed green, it surprised no one except the two enlisted guards stationed nearby. One of them blinked like a system error had just passed in humanoid form. Emma stepped into the lift and keyed in sublevel access. As the doors closed, her reflection flickered on the metal interior. Jaw set, eyes unreadable, posture relaxed but ready. She didn't look like insurance. She looked like inevitability. The descent was silent except for the faint hum of machinery. Sublevel 3 wasn't on most maps. It wasn't meant to be. It housed the old grid archives, blackout analysis logs, and something more dangerous than any weapon system. Truth that no one wanted to name until it was too late. The doors opened into dim amber lighting. Cold metal racks lined the corridor like ribs of a forgotten beast. In the far corner, terminal lights flickered with dormant status codes. Emma approached the central console and inserted the data card. The screen lit up with a soft chirp. No login prompt, just a single phrase across the black, COMMS trace, class Ember. She tapped in manual access commands, keystrokes that muscle memory remembered even if most systems had buried them under newer protocols. The console responded like it had been waiting for her specifically. A series of logs populated the screen. Timestamp location marker, signal reroute pattern. Then a phrase. Not a sentence, just 3 words. The same 3 that triggered the last Ember file 6 years ago. She read them once and didn't blink. Eventide signal read. A chill moved through her, not fear, not shock. Recognition. Someone was using an old trigger again, but not clumsily. The words weren't broadcast. They were embedded inside a data cycle loop, waiting for the right relay to awaken. Uplink 4. Not dead, just sleeping in someone else's design. She exited the log and encrypted the file with new access parameters. Her own. No one else in the building could open it now, not even Reed without her key. Footsteps approached from the far hall. She didn't turn immediately. When she did, the person who appeared wore no insignia she recognized. Civilian clothes but with military bearing. Eyes sharp, like they had once lived in war zones that didn't make it to the news. They paused a few meters away. You shouldn't be down here, the stranger said evenly. Emma didn't respond. Her expression didn't change. The stranger added, but then again, neither should I. Emma assessed him without moving. No immediate threat read in his posture, but posture could lie. Name, she said simply. Carter, he didn't offer a title. Contracted analyst, cybernetics division. She waited. He nodded toward the console. You're accessing sealed Ember traces. You followed me, she said without inflection. I followed the clearance override. Only 2 people have that level now. You're one. The other is the man who sent me to find you. Emma didn't ask who that was. Why? Carter hesitated. Because whatever Ember saw 6 years ago might be walking back in through your front door, and the next blackout won't wait for your command chain to believe it. His voice held familiarity with fear, not his own, but the shadow it left on places. Emma stepped away from the console but didn't log out. Who gave you the phrase? No one, he said. I found it where it shouldn't exist. She eyed him once more. Where? In a maintenance ping packet from uplink 3, buried under a false checksum. Exactly where no one would look, except someone who knew the graveyard wasn't emptied, only quiet. Emma spoke once almost to herself. Not dead, repurposed. Carter exhaled slowly. You think it's the same infiltrator? No, Emma said quietly. I think it's someone who studied their mistakes, which makes them worse. A low alarm pinged across the sublevel, internal, not public. Carter's head turned toward the sound. Emma didn't flinch. Night cycle lights dimmed further, shifting from amber to red at the edges. A warning, not an attack. Yet. Carter glanced at her. They'll ask questions when they see the access logs. They won't see them. He studied her face then, maybe realizing the woman in front of him wasn't here to report threats. She was here to stop them before anyone else knew the shape they took. What now? He asked quietly. Emma looked back at the console. Her pulse was steady, breath controlled. Now, she said, we don't wait for permission. The sublevel doors sealed shut above them with a hiss as the lights continued to lower. And somewhere topside, the first shadow inched silently toward the base perimeter, drawn not by chaos, but by certainty that no one was watching the dead channels. Except her. What happens when the first warning isn't a sound, but a silence that changes temperature? The sublevel lights had settled into low red veins across the ceiling, not an alarm yet, just a pulse, the kind a system gives when something brushes the perimeter of its blind spots. Emma felt it before Carter did. He looked up only when she moved toward the secondary console. Most people thought hacks came through wires. The smarter ones knew they came through assumptions. Emma typed a sequence that bypassed standard security logs entirely, rerouting her terminal access into an internal packet mirror. Carter watched her fingers move with precision no training video could recreate. You've done this before, he muttered. She didn't answer. The screen lit with a feed code, static at first, then a flicker of deep-field telemetry normally reserved for dormant satellite tracks. She expanded the grid overlay. Nothing moved where something should have. Carter leaned in. Is that? It's a shadow trace, Emma said. The term didn't appear in manuals. Shadow traces were emissions that didn't broadcast but absorbed, data ghosts that moved through a system without leaving footprints, only the absence of expected ones. Could it be ours? Carter asked. Emma's silence told him what he didn't want confirmed. She minimized the feed. The timestamp flashed again, 6 seconds behind real time. Someone was echoing their own network back at them. Does Reed know? Carter asked, though he already recognized the answer. He will before it matters, Emma said. She surged the terminal into offline mirrored mode and removed the data card. The screen dimmed back into resting state like nothing had happened. They left the console bay and took a back corridor leading to the freight tunnels under the west wing. Carter followed without question now. Whatever he thought she was before, order had rearranged itself. Halfway down the corridor, Carter spoke again. What did Ember do last time it was triggered? Emma kept walking. It didn't trigger, it reacted. There's a difference. Reacted to what? She stopped in front of a reinforced service hatch. To trust. He frowned. You think someone on base? I don't think, she said. I remember. Before he could ask what she meant, they reached the lift that branched to the command tier access passages. Emma keyed an old cipher into the panel. The system hesitated, then accepted. Carter watched her with an expression that wasn't admiration so much as recalibration. As they ascended, he said, You didn't answer me before. About what? Why you're here. Reed didn't bring you in for diagnostics. Emma's gaze stayed on the lift doors. He didn't bring me. He requested I stop pretending not to see it coming. The doors parted into a dimly lit maintenance corridor behind the primary command operations floor. Only a few personnel had clearance to use this passage. Carter kept pace half a step behind her. Up ahead, voices carried through a vent from the operations hub. She recognized Reed immediately. Don't care what the signal logs say, he was telling someone. If uplink 4 is clean, prove it without using our own network to do it. Another officer, someone confident and freshly briefed, responded sharply. With respect, sir, we've already patched secondary channels. There's no indication of active interference. A pause. Then Reed said just 4 words, but they landed like a door slamming on an echo. She doesn't speak without cause. The officer went quiet after that. Carter shot Emma a glance. They're listening now. No, she said. They're adjusting. Listening comes later. She stopped at an access panel that opened into the side tier overlooking the operations center. The ventilation grate gave them a limited view of the room below. Rows of terminals. Officers gathered around a central projection. The constant quiet of controlled urgency. Emma didn't step through. Instead, she activated a localized pulse scanner along the ceiling conduits. Seconds later, a faint blip shimmered across the detection band, an unauthorized relay node piggybacking on an internal temperature control sensor. Carter's eyes widened. They're already inside. No, Emma said softly. They never left. She shut the scanner off and slid the panel open into the hub. Every head in the room turned as she stepped in. No one blocked her path. Reed looked up from a terminal and gave a slight nod, not greeting, not permission. Just signal, proceed. Emma moved to the main console and placed the data card on the table. The strategist who had previously questioned her posture stiffened like he'd been thrown back into the memory of his own arrogance. Reed addressed the room. We're rerouting the entire uplink sweep based on her findings. You'll follow her lead on this, or you'll explain to HQ why you lost comms before the mission even launched. An Air Force tech captain frowned. Sir, with respect, shouldn't we vet whatever she found before? Emma interrupted without looking at him. You've been vetting the wrong channels for 48 hours. The breach isn't looking for your attention. It's waiting for your reroute protocols to go live. The captain swallowed whatever rebuttal he'd prepared. Reed nodded toward Emma. Show them. She inserted the card into the auxiliary port and brought up a mirrored interface instead of the open system. The officers leaned in as the silent telemetry logs played back. 3 lines of code flickered almost too quickly to catch, then froze. Eventide signal read. A murmur carried around the hub like a wind change. One of the colonels spoke first, quieter now. That's a legacy trigger. Emma didn't glance his way. Legacy only means you stopped watching it, not that it stopped watching you. Reed stepped closer to the console. Location. Not uplink 3, Emma said. That's the decoy. It's layered through uplink 4 and routed through your fallback channel. The one your secure teams don't monitor because it hasn't been used in 2 years. A logistics officer looked pale. Is that even possible without base credentials? Possible, Carter said quietly behind her. It's intentional. Whoever wrote the implant used authentication sequences below current detection thresholds. Someone studied our updates, not our frontline. Emma continued scanning the trace, eyes flickering across cascading data branches. 3 seconds later, she saw what she expected, a handoff marker buried under encrypted time stamps. Not remote, local. She didn't say it aloud, not yet. Someone in the room made the mistake of speaking on reflex. We need to lock external access immediately. That's not where it's coming from, Emma said, cutting through the panic before it took shape. A new silence settled, less dismissive, more afraid. Reed's gaze never left her, inside. She didn't confirm directly. The trigger didn't come from outside this base. The strategist who tried to categorize her earlier stepped forward cautiously. Has the source been identified? Emma let the moment breathe. Not fully, but the implant pattern matches a breach method from the last Ember trace. A weight fell across the hub like a curtain. Few in the room knew what Ember meant. The ones who did looked at her differently now, like she was a survivor of something they never admitted happened. Reed's voice lowered. You still have the clearance to access original Ember logs. I never relinquished it, she said. He nodded once, then you'll lead containment. One of the intel techs blinked. Lead, with all due respect, sir, she's not. Reed didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just said, finish that sentence and you won't be in this room when it matters. The tech shut up. Carter stepped forward slightly but remained silent. His presence didn't need introduction now. Proximity to Emma was credential enough. Reed faced the room. From this moment, she speaks as my direct authority on blackout security. You will follow her directives as if they're mine. If that's a problem, leave now. No one moved. Emma didn't respond with gratitude. She didn't respond at all. Authority wasn't something she sought. It was something silence gave her when words failed other people. She returned her attention to the console. Fingers moved over the interface as she isolated the echo signal path. Carter tracked the visuals as they duplicated across nodes, one at uplink 3, one suppressed under 4, and a third buried in a utility subnet none of the officers recognized. The colonel from Recon frowned. What subnet is that? Emma answered without looking up. Cold line 217. That's an auxiliary maintenance channel, someone muttered. No, Emma said. It was. When it was retired, its address range was repurposed as a diagnostic sandbox, which is exactly why no one monitors it. Reed crossed his arms. How long before it activates? Not long, Emma said, but it won't activate until we give it what it wants. And what's that? The tech captain asked carefully. She looked at him for the first time. A reroute. Reed caught up instantly. Once we shift communications to compensate for the assumed dead uplink. It'll open the tunnel it's sitting in, Emma finished. And then, someone asked quietly. Her expression didn't change. Then it doesn't jam you, it becomes you. A hushed curse fell from someone's lips. No one reprimanded it. Reed turned fully to Emma. Next steps. We need time, she said, and silence. Explain. She pointed to the ghost subnet on the display. No alerts, no patchwork. If it senses defense before reroute, it'll accelerate activation and bypass our firewall entirely. The colonel frowned, so we let it think we don't see it. Emma nodded. Until the handoff begins, then we isolate the subnet physically. How? The tech asked. Emma looked at Carter. Lift access, sublevel 3, circuit grid 217, hard cut. He nodded without hesitation. I know where. Reed didn't ask how Carter fit into this. He simply said, you'll go with her. Before Emma could move, the logistician who dismissed her earlier stepped forward. Not confrontational this time, something closer to anxious curiosity. Sergeant Steele, he said, cautious, is this the same kind of breach that happened in the Ember incident? Emma met his eyes, and for the first time her silence held something old and weathered. Not bitterness, memory. "No," she said quietly. "This time they know we survived it." The words didn't echo. They settled heavy, real. Reed issued orders without raising his tone. "Steele and Carter will secure the lower circuit relay. The rest of you prep contingency, blackout barriers, and quiet mode reroute protocols. No open signals. No chatter. If this thing is listening, it only hears what we allow." No one argued. As Emma turned to leave the hub, Reed spoke once more. "Steele." She paused. He didn't ask a question. He made a statement only she would understand. "If this is tied to Ember, it's not just code. Something else followed." She held his gaze for a long beat, then said, with the calm of someone who had already accepted the weight long ago, "I know." Carter fell into step beside her as they exited the operations tier through the maintenance corridor. Behind them, the room buzzed with muted urgency, but no one dared speak too loud. When the doors closed, Carter finally let out a breath. Not relief, just release. "Whatever happened 6 years ago," he said, "they didn't bury it deep enough." Emma walked without looking at him. "They buried the wrong thing." "And what was that?" She didn't hesitate. The truth of who opened the door in the first place. The service lights flickered once overhead, then steadied. They kept moving. And somewhere deep beneath the base, a silent relay waited, not to be found, but to be triggered by the very people trying to stop it. Why did it feel like the halls were holding their breath? Emma walked ahead of Carter through the auxiliary passageways, the kind built not for personnel but for silence. These weren't the routes used in tour or briefings. These were arteries of a building designed to operate even when no one admitted something was wrong. Fluorescent strips along the floor cast pale light, flickering in intervals like a heartbeat trying not to panic. Carter had questions, dozens, but he only spoke one at a time, like each had to earn its survival. "You never told me," he said quietly, "who was on the Ember case besides you." Emma didn't slow her stride. 4 analysts, 2 field techs, 1 commander. "And only you and the commander made it out." She corrected without emotion. "Only 2 walked out. One of us stayed stationed stateside after, 1 didn't." Carter didn't push. Some answers weren't shaped for words. They reached a sealed checkpoint door that required dual authentication. Emma keyed in her side of the code, then glanced at Carter. He hesitated only a moment before entering his. The lock disengaged with a heavy clank. As the door opened, the base above them throbbed with distant motion, but no alarms yet. That was the danger. Chaos warns people. Silence tricks them. They stepped into Sublevel 3's operations corridor, the one buried under maintenance records and outdated infrastructure tags. It smelled faintly of solder and recycled air. Overhead, old mesh wiring and decommissioned nodes clung to the ceiling like relics preserved for the wrong reasons. Carter checked a panel map. Circuit Relay 217 is through this cross hall and down into the old uplink archive. Emma was already moving. The deeper they went, the less the building felt like it belonged to the base above. Outdated warning labels, manual override levers, steel plating scuffed with numbered tags no longer in rotation. At one point, Carter wiped dust from a wall stencil that read, "Cold line access, authorized tech only." He let out a humorless breath. "When was the last time anyone came down here?" Emma replied without looking back. "When they thought the past couldn't repeat." They reached a bulkhead door with no digital panel, only a lockbox port and a physical crank valve. Carter stared at it like a ghost. "You're kidding." Emma was. She knelt, opened the lockbox with a bypass key from her utility belt, and disengaged the manual seal. Carter helped her heave the valve until it clicked. Inside, the air felt older. No hum of standard systems. No active overhead sensors. Just the quiet presence of circuits that had once mattered and were now left buried under trust. The auxiliary uplink archive wasn't large. maybe 20 meters deep, lined with access columns and cable trunks that hadn't seen routine checks in years. Somewhere in the dark, faint light blinked from a diagnostic port still alive. Carter stepped forward. There, junction rack 5. Emma scanned the area first, her instincts tuned to what wasn't obvious. No motion sensors. No active ones, he said. They would have been shut down when the uplink was decommissioned. Emma didn't bother responding. She already knew that was the problem. They reached the relay spine. Carter knelt and pried open the panel, revealing a cluster of bundled fiber and a legacy power transfer node. One wire glowed faintly, not in color but in frequency. A hum so quiet it felt like static behind bone. "This shouldn't be powered," Carter said under his breath. Emma crouched beside him. "It is not by us." His eyes darted up. "Then who?" "Not who," she said. "When?" He frowned. "That doesn't make." "Footsteps." "Not theirs." Not rushed, not cautious, just approaching. Carter froze. Emma didn't. She stood slowly, eyes scanning the dim aisle beyond the relay spine. A shadow broke from the far end of the archive. Not a shape, just a presence, a slight displacement where light should have landed differently. Emma stepped forward into clearer view. "Stop," she said calmly. The movement halted. Carter's hand hovered near his sidearm, though drawing it felt useless in a place where signals mattered more than bullets. The figure stepped closer, just enough light sliding over him to reveal a face. Mid-40s, weathered, wearing a contractor's uniform, not base-issued but not unfamiliar. His badge lanyard hung loose, displaying clearance level 3. He lifted his hand slightly, not in surrender, more in neutrality. "You're not supposed to be down here." Emma's voice stayed level. "Neither are you." His eyes took her in and something shifted, not fear, not surprise, recognition. "Steel," he said evenly. "Didn't think they'd pull you off the paper grid." Carter glanced at Emma. "You know him." She didn't answer. The man stepped closer. "Name's Holton, systems maintenance. I've been assigned to structural relay monitoring down here for the last 8 months. Emma's tone hardened a fraction. "No one been assigned to cold line 217 for 3 years. Holton didn't flinch. "Someone updated that order." "Who?" Carter demanded. Holton ignored him, eyes on Emma. "You're chasing a ghost again. Ember, isn't it?" Carter stiffened. "How the hell do you?" Emma raised a hand slightly, silencing him. Holton continued. "I heard whispers when they started cross-checking the old blackout files. Figured it was a matter of time before someone came digging." Emma stepped closer. "Why are you here, Holton?" "Same reason you are," he said, voice quiet. "Trying to keep this base from going dark." Something in his tone made Carter hesitate. If that were true, why not report the breach? Holton's jaw flexed. "Because no one listens until it's too late. I tried. Got told to stand down, not my sector, not my problem." Emma studied him with a gaze that made most men retreat. Holton stood his ground. "You saw the implant?" she asked. He nodded once. Didn't recognize the pattern at first. Looked like test telemetry pinned to a diagnostic cycle. But when I tried to trace the source, I got rerouted 3 layers deep. That's when I knew it wasn't us. "Who sent the report up the chain?" Carter asked. "No one," Holton said. "Because when I did, the log got wiped, and my tasking got reassigned from dormant relay sweeps to HVAC maintenance topside. Figured that was my warning." Emma didn't blink. "When was that?" 5 weeks ago." Carter let out a bitter breath, and no one thought that was suspicious. "Oh, I thought it was," Holton said. "Doesn't mean they cared." Emma understood that in a way Carter didn't. Some warnings were buried by people who feared what acknowledging them would mean about their past decisions. "Where is the implant now?" Emma asked. Holton pointed toward the relay cascade. "Embedded in the dead channel. It's dormant until you reroute. Then it wakes up and hooks into the fallback lines. The same fallback we're about to redirect communications through, Carter muttered. Holton looked at Emma with something like grim respect. You here to kill it? Yes, Emma said. He nodded once. Good, because it's not alone. Carter tensed, meaning. Holton motioned deeper into the archive. The implant's a trigger, but the back door it opens. That's already mapped across 3 other silent nodes. They've been built into your infrastructure like veins. You cut one, they'll pulse another. Carter looked at Emma. There are more relays like this. Emma didn't glance away. There always are. Holton continued. I only tracked 2 fully. The third hasn't lit yet, but trust me, when this one goes, the others will know. Carter muttered under his breath. This wasn't infiltration. This was incubation. Holton nodded to him. Whoever planned this didn't need access now. They got it years ago. All they needed was for the wrong people to stop paying attention. Emma spoke again. Show me the circuit map. Holton reached into his side pouch slowly, enough to show he wasn't drawing a weapon, and pulled out a worn datapad. He tapped the screen and handed it over. Emma studied the layout. Cold Line 217 was only the entry point. 2 others branched deeper, one attached to a fuel relay in sublevel 2, the other grafted into an environmental support patch near the medical wing. All marked inactive, all deceptively quiet. Carter scanned it over her shoulder. How have diagnostics not flagged this? Emma answered instead. Because diagnostics don't flag what they're told not to see. Holton gave a short, sharp breath. I tried scrubbing the circuit manually last week, locked me out of my own access group. When that happened, I knew it wasn't a simple breach. Why didn't you escalate harder? Carter pressed. Holton's eyes hardened. You think I did? You think people like me get taken seriously when we report ghosts? Emma closed the datapad and handed it back. You're not here by coincidence, she said. Someone thought your silence meant compliance. It didn't, Holton said. It meant I was waiting for someone who knew what Ember was. Carter blinked. Why wait? Holton's gaze flicked to Emma. Because she was on the last one, and the only person who could do what she did back then would be the one they'd bring in if it started again. Carter went quiet. Emma stepped back toward the relay. We need to sever node 217 now, if it activates before we isolate the others. Holton stepped in. You cut power at the spine and it'll spike the shadow nodes early. They'll know the link is compromised. Carter asked, then how do we do it without signaling the breach? Holton pointed to the underside of the relay. Manual kill switch, physical bypass, wasn't mapped in the digital network because no one thought the legacy fallback would matter. Emma crouched and located the panel Holton meant. It was faint, half hidden under dust and old identification tape. She peeled the tape back and exposed a recess lever locked under a rusted clip. Carter handed her a utility blade. She snapped the clip free. Holton crouched beside her. Once you trigger this, you'll have maybe 30 seconds before the node pings the other 2 for resync. Carter stiffened, and we haven't isolated the others yet. Emma spoke without looking up. We will. Holton looked at her carefully. You're planning to draw it out. Not draw, she said, confuse. Carter caught the meaning. You're going to make it think it succeeded. Emma gave the slightest nod. Ghost fields hide better when they think they're unseen, but they're blind when they first take over. Holton swallowed. If you screw the timing. I won't, she said. Carter hesitated. Reed is going to need to know we're doing this now. He already knows I won't wait for permission, Emma replied. Holton rose and moved toward a secondary terminal trunk. I'll monitor the spike and feed you the window, but you better move fast. Once it starts trying to talk to the others, you'll only have one shot to shut the rest. Emma stood and checked the old breaker box above the relay. Carter, Get ready to reroute the dummy channel when I say. He nodded, eyes scanning for the external failsafe. Emma's fingers brushed the cold metal of the lever. "Holton," she said quietly, "if you had reported this and they shut you down, why stay here?" Holton looked at her with something raw in his eyes. "Because the last time this happened, people I knew died in silence. I wasn't going to watch it happen twice." Emma didn't reply, but something in her gaze softened and sharpened all at once. Holton took position. Carter drew closer to the secondary panel. Emma rested her hand on the bypass lever and waited. 3 heartbeats passed. Then Holton said, "Now." Emma pulled. The relay shuddered. The hum died. And somewhere unseen, far above, or perhaps deeper still, something that had been waiting woke up to listen. What if the first sign of danger wasn't an alarm, but the absence of one where there should have been? The bypass lever didn't clang or spark. It didn't roar like something being destroyed. It simply stopped humming, as if the silence beneath the silence had been severed. For half a second, nothing moved. Then Holton's eyes snapped to the diagnostic flicker on his handheld. There it is, dead relay, but the shadow is searching. Carter was already at the secondary panel, fingers hovering. "Tell me when." Emma watched the overhead conduit, listening without needing the instruments. She could feel the shift, like the air changed pressure. Holton spoke low and fast. "The ghost branch is firing a reroute ping, looking for signal continuity. Window opening in." A faint click cut through the pipes above them. Holton's voice sharpened. "Now." Carter flipped the dummy switch on the maintenance panel. A false handshake signal shot back through the dead relay's channel, mimicking the structure of a successful takeover. Emma didn't move as it happened. She watched the lights on the panel, 3 blinked once in succession, then held steady. Holton let out a breath. The breach signal paused, it's evaluating the route. Carter glanced over. "Does it think it's in control?" Emma answered instead. "It thinks it's hidden." Holton checked something on his pad. "I can hold the false loop for maybe 60 seconds before it pushes another query to the other nodes." "No," Emma said, "you'll let it ping." Carter turned. "What?" Holton frowned. "You wanted to talk to the others." Emma stepped past them both and approached the main relay housing. "Not talk, reach. If it extends to the secondary veins, it exposes both live shadows." Holton hesitated. "You're using its own extraction pattern against itself." "Faster than hunting blind," Emma said. Carter's voice was low. "And if we're wrong?" Emma didn't pause. "Then we won't be around long enough to regret it." A faint hum returned, different tone now, lower, like a machine purring through teeth. Holton checked the feed. "Ping just left the dummy circuit, propagating." "How many nodes active?" Carter asked. Holton squinted at the trace. 2 shadows just lit on the map. They're waking to handshake. Emma was already moving. She keyed into the manual breaker above the subline junction and ripped out the access panel. Sparks flickered from an old contact strip. The smell of scorched shielding filled the space. "Holton," she said, "where's the closest physical access to the branch under the medical support tunnel?" "Maintenance conduit C7, he answered, recalling the map. "Back the way we came, then down ladder shaft 3. She turned to Carter. "You take the fuel line relay. Holton will guide you." Carter nodded, then stopped. "And you?" "Medical line," she said simply. Holton looked between them. "You'll never make both before the sync pulse hits." "I don't need both," she said. "I just need to sever one before the signal stabilizes." Carter grabbed a tool kit from the side rack, checking its contents with practiced speed. "What do I do if the branch isn't where the map says? Those diagrams are old." "Listen before you cut," Emma said. "Shadow tech pings differently from dormant circuits. It vibrates like memory. You'll feel it." Holton pointed down the darkened hall. 4 minutes, maybe less, before it tries to escalate into signal control. Emma didn't waste another second. She took the service corridor at a pace that wasn't a sprint, but carried the inevitability of one. Carter and Holton split the opposite direction, boots thudding against steel flooring, echo swallowing their footsteps as they vanished into darkness. The deeper Emma went, the darker it became. Emergency strips along the floor glowed a faint red, but the walls drank most of the light. The corridor tightened ahead. Old emergency signage peeled along one wall. The air tasted of metal and dust that had waited too long without movement. She passed junction markers until she reached shaft access 3. A ladder descended into a vertical chute lined with rusted pipe frames and old insulation wrap. She didn't hesitate. One hand gripped the side rail, one foot on the rung, and she dropped 3 levels down without stopping. Her boots hit ground with a soft reverberation. The Medline auxiliary corridor here was narrow, built to feed power and comm redundancies into secure triage rooms in case of primary system failure. No one used it anymore because everyone trusted the upgrades installed years after Ember. Everyone but her. She reached the circuit hatch tucked behind a defunct oxygen filtration panel. The metal was cold. She kneeled and ran her fingers just above the seam. There. A faint vibration, not from power but from intent. It didn't buzz like electricity. It thrummed like something remembering it was alive. Emma unlatched the panel and pulled it open. Inside, 3 layers of outdated wiring mesh had been reorganized. Someone, or something, had rewired access to match modern handshake signals without updating the registry. Old systems pretending to be dead had been given new breath. She scanned the trunk. 3 cables were dark. A 4th, nearly invisible, glimmered faintly in the seam where 2 conduits joined. She touched it gently. The hum inside it responded like a pulse. Somewhere through the metal, a low resonance echoed, not an alarm. A stir. Voices weren't coming through, but something was moving, the signal trying to test its new ground. Holton's voice crackled through Carter's short-range link. Emma could hear faint relay through the hatch speaker. Pulse just hit branch 2. Carter, you should be in range. Carter's voice came back tense. Found it. It's nested under a coolant feed, cutting now. Emma located the manual cutoff for the medical conduit. It was buried 7 inches behind shielding, sealed under resin someone once believed would never need to be accessed again. She pulled a folding blade from her sleeve and started cutting through the resin. Above, she could hear the pipes vibrating with the beginnings of sync traffic, 1s and 0s crawling through dead veins like insects. Holton again. Emma, branch 3's warming, ping arc moving faster. She didn't respond. Her blade dug deeper. Resin flaked away in sharp strips. Beneath it, metal glinted dull in the half-light. Then Carter's voice came through, breathless. First relay cut, shadow pulses pausing, but only for a second. Holton, it's splitting. The 3rd branch is holding signal. Emma scraped the last of the resin away and exposed the kill switch, a mechanical lock layered into the bypass frame. Holton spoke sharply through the line. Emma, branch 3 is accelerating. It's going to try and bridge before you're done. She braced a hand against the wall and yanked the old lever free from its housing. It resisted, then gave with a creak that sounded too organic. The hum in the conduit sputtered and dropped. Holton, medical branches offline, signal just glitched. Carter, but the ghost ping is still active. Emma didn't look up. Then the 3rd node is the pivot. Holton swore under his breath. We don't have time to get to it. The sync bridge will complete in under a minute. Where is it? Emma asked. Holton hesitated. Environmental patch, behind the triage wing, but access is sealed, requires command clearance. Carter broke in. Reed can open it. No, Emma said. They'll trace the override. And if the breach is monitoring active command codes, It'll reroute the attack before we reach the panel. Holton's voice dropped lower. Then how? Emma stood. There's still a cold access point below the environmental branch. Carter's reply held disbelief. Sublevel 4, that's sealed. Not completely, Emma said. They never removed the old inspection crawl. Holton's breath caught. That shaft isn't rated for traversal anymore. I don't need it to be rated, she said. Carter, Emma, you'll never make it in time. She was already moving. She climbed back up the ladder shaft, not to retreat, but to cut across to the old maintenance junction that had been welded shut after flood damage 2 years into the war. But welded didn't mean removed. She reached the service plate, pried it open with the heel of her boot and an iron bar hanging from a bracket, and slid through the narrow opening feet first. The crawl space beyond was dark, lined with corroded metal and half-collapsed supports. Dust choked the air. The incline sloped downward, too tight for someone broader than her frame. Perfect. Holton's voice echoed faintly through Carter's comm, bouncing down the shaft like whispers. Pulse just left branch 1, heading for the next sink. Carter, Emma, where are you? Emma didn't waste breath. Her elbows and boots dragged her forward through the tight choke of the crawlway. She felt each rung of the old steel mesh below her palms. Somewhere ahead, the smell of ozone faintly bled into the dust. 20 feet in, she heard it. The ghost pulse, no longer distant but alive, like a wire being plucked beneath skin. The crawl narrowed again, ending at a corroded grate just big enough for her to angle through. She slammed her palm against it twice. It bent inward. The third hit broke it. She dropped into a small chamber lined with control piping and a dormant breaker cabinet. The space was barely tall enough to crouch in. A single flickering bulb from decades past cast sickly light. There, behind an old coolant redirect valve, ran the third branch, thin as a nerve, dark to the eye, bright to the wrong kind of signal. She crawled to it and placed her hand on the conduit. The hum was stronger here, eager, waiting. Holton's voice filtered dimly through the vent shaft above. It's almost at the jump point. Emma pulled her blade again. This time, she didn't look for a lever. She dug straight into the conduit insulation, tearing it open to expose the synthetic fiber bundle inside. Static danced along the metal. Somewhere above, the pipes groaned. Carter's voice was tight. Emma, now. She wrapped the exposed bundle with both hands. No fear, no gloves, and ripped. For an instant, her hands burned with the aftershock of a live relay being severed mid-transfer. Not enough to wound, but enough to remember. The hum cut. Not quieted, killed. Above, Holton's voice exploded into the channel. Signal drop, all shadow branches just flatlined. Carter followed, breath hitched. The tracer just died at the source. It didn't jump. Emma sat back against the cold metal wall of the crawl chamber. Her pulse wasn't racing. Her breathing didn't spike. She closed her eyes once, then opened them again. Holton sounded almost stunned. They'll think the branch failed on handoff. They won't know it was isolated manually. Carter added, quieter now, but they'll know someone found them. Emma finally spoke, good. Carter hesitated, good. She stared at the darkness beyond the threads of light. Ghosts retreat when they think they've been seen. That buys us time. Holton exhaled. We need to get you out of there. Structural sensors will trip eventually. Emma looked at her burned palms absently. What's happening topside? Holton checked his pad. No alarms triggered. The system registered a failed branch test and dropped into passive diagnostic mode. Reed is holding command steady. Carter spoke again. We need to tell him what we found. Emma's response was quiet, but it cut through the space like a clean blade. We're not done. Holton's feet hit a ladder above her as he started climbing to intercept. What do you mean, not done? You killed all 3 branches. Emma shifted, pressing her shoulder against the wall to brace herself as she rose. 3 branches doesn't mean one origin. Silence answered that. Then Carter's voice came through, realization slow and chilling. This wasn't insertion. No, Emma said, it was rehearsal. Holton stopped on the ladder. They were testing pathways, not executing. Emma nodded to herself in the dark, which means this wasn't the attack. Carter spoke the only words that fit the air now. Then where is the real one? The light above her flickered once. And somewhere far beyond the sublevels, the first real thread of danger finally stirred. What if the silence wasn't relief, but the inhale before impact? Emma's palms still tingled where the live conduit had bitten her skin, but she barely felt it. Pain existed somewhere behind priority. She climbed up through the narrow crawl shaft the same way she'd entered, only now every inch of rusted metal seemed to vibrate with something unseen. Carter's voice filtered faintly through Holton's comm as he climbed the ladder above her. Base systems still stable. No network panic, no lockdown triggers. Holton paused halfway up. That's the problem. They think the malfunction was internal decay. Ghost doesn't panic when you pretend you didn't see it. Emma emerged from the crawlspace hatch and brushed metal dust from her sleeve. She didn't look back down the shaft, which means they're repositioning. Carter met them at the junction point, face damp with sweat but eyes sharp. If that wasn't the real strike, then we've just shown our hand early. Holton wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist. Not fully. They think the line died mid-test. They might believe their fallback is still viable once they reroute from another. No, Emma cut him off quietly. They'll change entry point now. Holton stiffened. How fast? Faster than we move if we guess wrong, she said. Carter moved closer. Then what's next? We killed their hidden veins. Emma looked at him, not hard, not soft. We cut the limbs, but the hand still exists. Holton exhaled slowly, so they reach from somewhere else. Emma nodded once. Carter frowned. Then where's the new breach? Emma didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tapped into the auxiliary diagnostic feed Holton had been tracking. The ghost pings were gone, flatlined as if nothing had ever touched the circuits. But flatlines lied. She pointed at the empty telemetry band. Look at the time stamps, the moment the third branch died. Carter leaned in. There's a 5-second silence gap. Holton blinked, so. Emma raised her eyes. The last time I saw a gap like that, the implant didn't die. It jumped platforms. Holton swore under his breath. To where? There were only 3 shadow branches. No, she corrected, 3 branches we saw. A cold realization slipped over Carter's expression. You're saying there's another relay. Not a relay, Emma said, a carrier. Holton frowned, meaning human, hardware, drone, what kind of carrier? Emma didn't soften the truth. The kind that doesn't need to hide in dead wiring to infiltrate communication. Carter blinked, then what does it hide in? Emma's gaze sharpened. Logistics. Holton froze. You mean supply routing? Emma started walking back toward the main access corridor. Think about it. Someone revived an old node under the guise of maintenance. Someone wiped Holton's flag. Someone approved his reassignment. Someone built silence into the infrastructure years ago. Carter followed. So the breach isn't just using forgotten nodes. It's using active channels built into movement. Holton caught up beside them. But how? You can't embed ghost code into logistics unless. Emma supplied the answer. Unless the system that tracks movement has been compromised longer than anyone noticed. Holton's frown deepened. Supply transfer manifests, auto-authentication keys, scheduled uplink bursts every 12 hours. Carter cursed quietly. They're not trying to take over the comm network directly anymore. They're riding the one system that never goes offline. Holton added, The one system no one audits because it runs under clearance assumed safe. Emma stopped walking. Cargo management. Holton nodded grimly. If they embedded code in registries through shipping manifests. Carter finished. Every time a transport logs in and out, it refreshes network credentials. Emma didn't look at either of them when she said, which means the new breach point isn't underground. Holton swallowed. Where then? Emma turned her head slightly, topside. Carter waited, as in above command. No, she said, among them. That's when Holton realized what she meant. The carriers aren't hardware, they're personnel systems. Carter stared. You're saying someone on base downloaded the implant. Not downloaded, Emma said, activated. Holton's face hardened, which means someone here is running ghost code through their terminal access. Carter asked the question neither of them wanted voiced. Do they know they're doing it? Emma didn't answer right away. Some did, some didn't. But she didn't speak that thought. Instead, she said, we need to get back to command operations, now. Holton checked his pad. We'll need to reroute. Primary passage is sealed during diagnostic windows. Emma looked at the wall ahead, found the faded stencil that read AUX Tier 2M, and started toward it without waiting. We don't have time to go around authorized routes. Holton followed, unlocking the bypass grate to the tier access chute. Carter sealed the panel behind them. As they ascended, the temperature rose by degrees. The hum of active power systems vibrated through the infrastructure like a heartbeat accelerating. They emerged behind the upper maintenance wing on the east side of command. Emma didn't pause. She moved down the service walkway that overlooked the operations hub from above. Glass separated them from the interior, but not sound. Commander Reed was standing at the central table, 3 officers around him, screens filled with mission structure updates. The room looked orderly, too orderly. Carter leaned close to the glass. They don't know yet. Emma didn't take her eyes off the officers on the floor. They will. Holton wiped the dust from his palms and keyed open a maintenance door leading down into the ops floor from the secure tier. Reed noticed before they stepped through. His gaze locked onto Emma first. The question in his eyes wasn't if something was wrong, it was how wrong. Reed stepped away from the table to meet them before anyone else could intercept. Report. Emma wasted no time. 3 shadow branches cut, they were bait. Reed's jaw tightened. You're sure? Carter answered, the network never lost full signal. It adapted. Holton added, telemetry gap confirmed transfer rather than collapse. Reed looked back at Emma. Where did it go? Logistics network, she said. Manifest routing. Carrier protocol inside personnel movements. Reed's silence wasn't denial, it was calculation. One of the officers at the mission panel, Major Harland, logistics coordination, looked over with confusion. Commander, we haven't had any cargo reroutes since. Emma's voice cut through the air like a blade drawn without flourish. What was the last outbound transfer logged? Harlan hesitated. Just a standard movement. 2 cargo haulers scheduled for off-site depot transfer. Automated clearance, green-lighted by routing AI. Emma stared at him, time stamp. Harlan checked the screen. 38 minutes ago. Holton spoke low. That's right in the silence gap. Emma already knew. Destination. Harlan scrolled. Northern Com Depot adjacent to drone calibration station. Transfer window 2 hours. Why? Carter muttered, because they just exported the breach. Reed turned sharply. Harland, who was on deck for that dispatch. Harland looked unsettled now. Sergeant Dyer and Specialist Rowan, they cleared the load prep before auto-release. Emma's eyes sharpened. Were their terminals synced to base updates? Harland nodded slowly. Standard procedure. They logged updates 2 hours prior. Holton swore quietly. That's the transfer. the implants inside the departure clearance. Reed didn't hesitate, shut down the convoy. Harland moved to the console. "Sir, the haulers already left perimeter range 15 minutes ago. We can't remote stop without triggering countermeasures." Emma stepped forward. "The breach will activate once the haulers connect with the depot uplink. It'll ride the sync handshake into drone command." Reed's voice went low and dangerous. "What's the time frame?" Carter checked Holton's pad. "Based on distance and standard uplink response, maybe 40 minutes until full integration." Harland added, voice strained. "And once that happens, every drone synced to the depot could be hijacked or turned into a relay." Reed nodded once, cold resolve in his posture. "Then we intercept before they dock." Carter looked at Emma. "How? We don't have anyone in range." Emma spoke like the decision had always been made. "We don't send a response team." Reed didn't blink. "We go." A few officers nearby turned at that, startled. Reed ignored them. Harland looked worried. "Commander, if you leave the base." "Hold the mission planning in my absence," Reed ordered. Emma didn't move until Reed's eyes returned to hers. No theatrics passed between them, only understanding. Reed's words were meant only for her. "Your point." Emma nodded once. "I'll need route clearance and override access to depot comm gates." "You'll have both," Reed said. Carter looked between them. "We're wheels up how?" Reed answered, "Rapid team. No broadcast, transport bay 6, 10 minutes." Holton stepped back. "I'll stay here. If the breach reactivates locally, someone has to hold the line." Emma didn't question it. Some people knew when they belonged on the inside of a lock. Reed turned to Carter. "You're with us." Carter straightened. "Yes, sir." Harland looked pale. "If it's already in the manifest system." Emma cut him off gently. "Then we sever it before it completes the handoff." Holton exhaled, something like belief settling behind his eyes. "Don't miss." Emma turned and headed for the lift leading to the transport bay. Carter followed. Reed waited a second longer, scanning the room, the officers, the projections, the false calm, before he stepped after them. Holton remained behind in the hub, eyes on the telemetry bands that now lay eerily dormant. He whispered to himself, not in fear but in memory. "It's never the blackout you hear coming. It's the one you think you already stopped." As Emma entered the lift with Reed and Carter, she flexed her burned hands once and let the pain remind her of something she rarely said out loud. This wasn't over. And the next silence wouldn't be a warning. It would be the cost. What if the danger wasn't waiting ahead, but riding with them already? The lift doors sealed with a hydraulic hiss, cutting off the muted thrum of command. Emma stood at the front, eyes fixed on nothing and everything. Reed leaned against the side rail, arms crossed, gaze unreadable. Carter checked the portable relay scrambler strapped to his vest for the third time, not out of nerves, but to keep his thoughts from circling too loudly. The lift dropped fast, passing tiers of restricted infrastructure until the air itself seemed to tighten. When the doors opened, the subterranean transport bay yawned ahead, lit in strips of low amber, quiet as a sealed vault. Only a skeleton crew, New Bay 6, existed. Two techs stood at the rear of a matte black tactical hauler, smaller than a convoy truck but faster, armored at the chassis and built for silent deployment. The whine of power cells adjusting to standby readiness echoed faintly in the hangar. Reed spoke only once as they approached. "We take no escort." The techs didn't question it. They stepped aside as Carter climbed into the hauler's rear system's bench. Reed entered the passenger side. Emma took the driver's seat. No one offered keys. The ignition recognized her clearance the moment her palm touched the console. The bay doors split open ahead, revealing a sliver of night, not full darkness, but that muted, early-hour blue where horizon and sky are still making terms with each other. The hauler rose on its suspension and rolled out into the launch passage. Behind them, the door sealed. Reed watched Emma in silence. Carter broke it first. If the convoy took standard Route 9, we can intercept at the Ridgeway Junction before it enters comm zone access. Emma glanced at the nav. Too exposed. They'll detect our approach if they're already compromised. Reed nodded. Alternate. Carter brought up the regional terrain overlay. Side route through the West Escarpment. Service roads aren't logged in transit manifests. We'll shave off 7 minutes. Emma adjusted course without needing the map. The hauler accelerated into the narrow canyon road that wove away from the main base perimeter. The tires were Silentron, designed to grip sand, stone, or snow without noise. Overhead, the sky held a low crescent moon, blurred by thin clouds. Reed finally spoke. Convoy frequency. Carter tapped the relay set. Encrypted. But if the implant is riding their systems, they won't broadcast anything irregular. They'll look clean until they make contact with the depot. Emma kept her eyes on the road, though nothing ahead was visible beyond the hauler's skeletal lights. The breach will mask itself inside their link handshake. Once they connect, it spreads into drone command via maintenance update. Reed nodded once, then they don't connect. Silence settled again, but not the kind that lingered. This one gathered weight as they drew further into the canyons. At the 30-kilometer mark, Carter picked up a faint transponder tick across their scanner. That's one of them, hauler A12. They're on schedule. Emma asked distance. 18 minutes ahead if they stay on standard route. Carter checked the second signal. The other one's trailing, probably half a click back from lead. Reed's voice came low. Do they have escorts? Not listed, Carter said, but that won't matter if the breach is autonomous. Emma downshifted and veered off onto a dark-cut path that wound between two jagged cliff ridges. The hauler's lights cut out automatically as it switched into black mode traversal. Now only the faint HUD displays inside lit the interior. Carter gripped the overhead bar. You sure this road connects? It was used during border runs 8 years ago, Emma said, before the flood destroyed half the outposts. Reed watched her. That road was sealed. For convoys, she said, not for two-axle tacticals. Carter glanced back at the nav feed. We'll need visuals soon. Terrain cam is spotty. Emma said nothing. She didn't need to see every edge. She remembered it. Reed rested one arm on the console frame. If the breach jumped into personnel routing, it could have embedded into any manifest link terminal. Carter exhaled, meaning the drivers don't have to know anything. Their systems are carrying it. Emma's voice was quiet. Or someone riding with them is more than a carrier. Reed absorbed that without visible reaction. We neutralize either. Carter checked the time code. 14 minutes to predicted intercept. The path narrowed ahead, the canyon walls drawing closer. Rocks thinned into open sand, then hard clay. The hauler emerged from the cut and onto a plateau overlooking the Ridgeway Junction, a dark artery splitting into two moonlit routes that disappeared over separate slopes. Carter leaned forward. Convoys taking the southern descent, if we cut across this ridge. Emma didn't wait for the rest. She angled the hauler toward a slope not meant for vehicles. The chassis dipped, then gripped, stabilizing on the incline. Carter braced. You're taking the drop path. Emma's foot pressed gently on the accelerator. Only if you want to reach them before they breach depot range. Reed angled slightly to maintain balance as the vehicle descended. The canyon below stretched out like a throat-swallowing light. Minutes dragged, but not slowly, the kind of minutes that carry weight. Carter updated. We have line of sight on the lead hauler, 800 meters and closing. Reed said, lights off until we're parallel. Emma eased the speed back just enough to float behind rock shadow. The tactical vehicle's silhouette melted into the terrain. The convoy hauler, a heavy-duty carrier with matte plating and 2 rear modules, moved with unhurried purpose down the southern track. No visible escort, no signal flare, too ordinary. Carter scanned. Thermal scan shows only 2 personnel in the cab, no rear heat signatures. Reed asked manifest. Carter checked the encrypted dispatch feed. Classified cargo tagging, supply crates, nothing off book. Emma didn't believe that for a second. Reed leaned closer to the forward display. What about the second hauler? Carter switched scans. Just came over the ridge trail behind them, similar readings, both clean on IFF codes. Emma watched the lead hauler coast down the incline. How long until depot signal zone? Carter checked. 6 minutes to handshake radius, 8 to entry. Reed looked at Emma once. Options. Emma accelerated. Carter blinked. We're engaging. Not here, Emma said. We force a stop before line cross. Reed nodded. Block the pass. Too obvious, she said. They'll trigger distress link and failover will carry the breach forward. Carter frowned. Then how? Emma's voice was so quiet he almost missed it. We make them pull over without thinking it's us. Reed's expression shifted, an understanding with no words. Mechanical diversion. Emma angled the hauler down a side track that curved around the main descent route. The terrain buckled and rose again on the far side. Carter watched the map. This loop intersects ahead of them, if we get there first. We won't stop in front of them, Emma said. Reed finished. We'll stop behind them. Carter blinked. Why behind? Because no driver checks rear sensors when nothing's wrong up front, Emma said. They reached the pass entry just ahead of the convoy's trajectory. Emma cut the lights completely and rolled the vehicle into position parallel to a rock shelf overlooking the dirt track below. Carter checked the range. They'll pass us in 90 seconds. Reed glanced at the dirt embankment leading down to the route. We breached their cab. Emma shook her head. No breach. Carter frowned. Then how do we disable without alert? Emma finally looked at him. We don't hit the truck. He stared. Then what? She pointed to the ground. A sliver of steel jutted barely above the dirt, a buried maintenance pipe once part of an abandoned coolant line. Reed's eyes flicked to her, understanding before Carter did. Line breach simulation. Carter's confusion turned into realization. You're going to fake a hazard on the route. Emma was already pulling a compact cutter from the utility compartment. Carter moved to help, prying the old pipe joint free of compacted sand. Together, they pulled a section loose and dragged it across the descent path at a deceptive slant, just enough to glance the undercarriage of a passing heavy transport without destroying it. Reed kept watch as they worked. 60 seconds. Emma wedged the pipe under a ridge of stone and dirt so it wouldn't shift on contact. Carter stepped back. That won't disable them fully. It just needs to rattle suspension and trigger caution protocol, she said. They sprinted back up the embankment to the hauler and sealed the side hatch. Emma positioned the vehicle out of sight, engine idling at ghost speed. Carter monitored the tracker. Lead convoy closing, 50 meters. Reed watched the path below. The convoy hauler hit the pipe at a shallow angle. A metallic jolt rang across the frame, followed by a hiss of shifting suspension. The vehicle didn't crash, but it slowed, warning lights flaring dimly on its console. Carter pointed. They're stopping. Emma said nothing. The hauler rolled to a halt just beyond the bend, hazard lights flickering briefly. The cab door opened. One of the drivers stepped out, scanning the ground with a handheld lamp. Carter pulled binoculars from the side kit. That's Sergeant Dyer. Emma lowered the side window slit just enough for air. And the second. Still inside, Carter said. Can't identify from here. Reed looked at Emma. She didn't blink. Dyer crouched to inspect the ground. The lamp swept over the damaged pipe. He stood, tapping his earpiece, then turned to speak to the person still in the cab. Carter checked the signal line. Standard comms, no external data burst, they don't suspect anything. Emma put the hauler in motion. Reed gave one nod, we move. Emma drove down the embankment path calmly, not racing, matching the behavior of another maintenance or escort vehicle arriving by chance. Their lights stayed off. The engine stayed low. Carter watched Dyer as they approached. He sees us. Emma slowed to a roll 10 meters behind the convoy hauler and stopped. Not close enough to threaten, not far enough to ignore. Dyer shielded his eyes and called out cautiously, "Unit name." Reed answered from the passenger side window, "Base maintenance dispatch. You trigger a damage flag." Dyer hesitated only a second before nodding. Something on the track might have clipped an exposed line. "Stay there," Reed said, authoritative without force. Carter checked the rear hauler. It was slowing too, responding to the signal of lead halting. Emma cut the engine, but kept her hand near the ignition. Reed opened his door and stepped out calmly into the pale pre-dawn light. Carter moved to follow, but Emma stopped him with a look. "Don't move until he signals." Carter swallowed and nodded. Reed approached Dyer, posture relaxed but alert. Dyer straightened. "Didn't expect backup. We're cleared to finish the run after check." Reed kept voice level, "Show me clearance." Dyer pulled up his wrist console, projecting a faint hollow of his orders. Reed glanced briefly. Then his attention shifted, almost imperceptibly, to the cab. Emma saw it too. Someone was still inside, but not moving to exit. Reed lowered the hollow with a nod. "Truck 2 carrying same manifest." Dyer gestured to the ridge behind. "Yes, sir. Linked exit schedule." Reed stepped slightly to the side. "Call your partner out." Dyer hesitated. "She's running diagnostics on the console." "She can step out," Reed said, colder now. Dyer's jaw moved. Then he turned to the cab. "Rowan, get out here." A beat of silence. Then the cab door opened. Specialist Rowan stepped down, slow and still, expression blank, not confused, not tense. "Empty." Emma saw the stillness in her movement, too measured. Reed caught it the same instant. Rowan glanced once at Emma's vehicle, then at Reed, and for a flicker of a moment something moved behind her calm eyes, like a thought that wasn't hers. Reed spoke carefully. "Rowan, state your last terminal log." She blinked once. "Supply pad 3, routine manifest sync." Carter muttered under his breath, unheard by anyone else, "She's been touched." Reed's voice never raised. "Who cleared your sync?" Rowan answered without pause. "Automated routing chain." Her cadence was wrong, too linear, too devoid of recall. Emma opened her door. Reed didn't turn, but his voice carried to her without looking. "She doesn't know." Emma stepped into the pale light. Rowan's gaze flicked toward her, barely, like a lens adjusting. Reed's tone dropped into something only Rowan would hear. "Are you carrying external code protocol?" Rowan blinked slowly, expression unchanged. "I don't understand." Emma's eyes stayed fixed on Rowan's posture, not her face. "What was the last manual command you executed?" Rowan answered with a half-second delay. "Subsystem update for convoy pairing." Dyer turned to her, confused. "You didn't mention." Reed cut him off with his hand. "Stand down, Sergeant." Dyer obeyed, uncertain. Emma stepped closer to Rowan, not threatening, not aggressive. She spoke quietly. "What phrase was embedded in your sync confirmation?" Rowan didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't breathe wrong. Then, in the flat tone of someone reciting something they didn't hear when they said it, she spoke. Eventide signal red. Everything went still. Carter exhaled, voice breaking through the calm. "Emma." She was already moving. Not to restrain Rowan. To reach the cab. Because if Rowan was the carrier, the implant was inside the system already. Reed barked one word, "Go." Emma reached the cab, slamming the door open. The console blinked silently. A faint red thread of code pulsed across the comm interface. Already alive. Already waiting to connect. Not to the depot. To something else. Something closer. And Emma realized, too late, that the convoy wasn't the destination. It was the signal tower. When did mission stop being about where the danger was, and start being about who unknowingly carried it? Emma's fingers hovered an inch above the console inside the convoy cab. The faint red thread across the interface flickered, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to the machine it pulsed through. It wasn't active yet, not fully, but she could feel its timing. It was waiting for a signal that would never come if she moved fast enough. Rowan stood outside, the desert wind catching a few strands of her hair as if she were any other specialist on any other route. But something in her stillness was wrong. Dyer stood beside her, uncertainty twisting into doubt. Reed watched everything, eyes cold and calculating without hesitation. Carter spoke from the tactical hauler, voice low in Emma's ear. That code thread is dormant loop. It's mimicking system latency until it detects a depot handshake. It won't reach the depot, Emma said. Reed stepped closer to Rowan. His tone was measured, almost soft. You don't know you're carrying it, do you? Rowan's eyes flickered with a confusion that didn't reach her pulse. Carrying what, sir? Dyer's gaze snapped to her. Rowan, what did you install? She blinked once. I didn't install anything. Emma's voice came calm but hard. That's what makes it work. Carter's scanner chirped quietly. There's a mirror relay inside the cab log. It pushed a key request 3 minutes after departure. It's dormant until uplink proximity. Reed stepped around Rowan toward the cab. Can it jump without depot contact? Emma answered without looking up. Not without a live acceptance loop. Meaning? Reed asked. It needs a relay to authorize it, she said. If it doesn't find one at the depot, it'll search for another with equal clearance. Carter's voice dropped. Command. Dyer stared. Base command. No, Emma said. Someone on base with direct update access. Reed understood immediately. If we warn them before extraction, we tip the breach. It shifts carriers again. Carter added, even if we shut both trucks down, the implant could bounce to other terminals through the manifest echo. Dyer swallowed. Then what the hell do we do? Emma didn't answer. She was already digging into the side panel beneath the console, prying open the hardware relay deck. She traced the threads of wiring until she reached a node that didn't match the others, a slimline drive embedded where a heat regulator panel should be. Rowan's voice came unexpectedly soft behind her. I didn't put that there. Emma didn't look at her. I know. Dyer took a step back, staring at Rowan like she was a ghost wearing his teammate's skin. How long? Reed cut in. She wasn't chosen, she was available. Rowan flinched, not at the words, but like something inside her rewired itself in response to hearing them spoken. Emma exposed the embedded drive and saw the connector imprint. It wasn't an add-on. It was rooted into the manifest reporter and hidden under a false hardware tag, likely installed cycles earlier. Carter moved closer behind her. If you pull it wrong, it could spike a synapse burst and jump to remote sync. Emma didn't stop working. I know. Rowan spoke again, quieter. Do I still have access to them? Emma paused her movement for the first time. To who? Rowan's brow trembled. The voices, the ones that told me to authorize the patch, they didn't sound wrong at the time. Dyer turned away like he couldn't hear any more of it. Reed's face didn't change. Emma. She looked back at the drive. I'm severing the handshake manually. Carter dropped to one knee beside her, ready to intercept system feedback. On your call. Emma slid 2 fingers along the wiring harness and found the central connector by feel. Her voice went quiet, but not soft. 3 seconds, then the carrier breaks. Reed drew his sidearm, not at Rowan, but at the junction behind the cab, ready to sever the whole vehicle's power if needed. Emma counted silently. On 1, the hum inside the console changed. Carter saw the system wake and try to hand off the dormant code. On 2, Rowan gasped and grabbed the side of the truck like something had just torn loose inside her chest. On 3, Emma ripped the connector free. The red thread across the console didn't disappear. It stuttered, glitched, then froze. Carter's hand flew across his interface. It's trying. Emma slammed the connector against the panel and twisted the metal prongs until they snapped. Then the console went black. Not the power, just the line the ghost was writing. Rowan inhaled sharply, like she'd been underwater without knowing and just broke the surface. Dyer was at her side instantly. Rowan, say something. She blinked fast, eyes clearing as if fog had receded. What did I do? Emma didn't answer her. The question belonged to someone who needed comfort. She was here for containment. Carter scanned the dead connector. The implant didn't jump. It tried, but the carrier severed too fast. Reed gave one nod. Secondary hauler. Carter pointed back up the track. It stopped when this one did, but if the implant copied itself. Emma was already moving. Carter and Reed followed. Dyer helped Rowan toward the tactical hauler, where she sat heavily on the ground, head in her hands. The second convoy truck was 50 meters up the incline, idling, lights flickering. No one had stepped out. Reed approached first this time, weapon holstered but eyes sharp. Emma moved left around the back of the hauler. Carter flanked the opposite side. The cab door creaked open, but no one stepped out. Emma's hand landed on the metal frame, cold. She pulled the door fully open and found the cab empty. Carter scanned the rear. There's no one inside. Reed checked the manifest imprint. Was it unmanned? Emma opened the rear module. Empty. No cargo. No personnel. No equipment. Just straps and blank pallets. Carter's blood ran cold. They paired a decoy hauler to mask activity in the first. Reed stared into the vacant bay. The second wasn't carrying supplies. Emma stepped inside, boots echoing on the bare metal floor. It was carrying silence. Carter turned slowly. So where was the real cargo? Emma didn't look at him. There was no cargo. Holton's voice crackled through Carter's comm from base. Status. Carter swallowed. Lead hauler compromised but contained. Second hauler is a shell. Holton hesitated, then the breach. Emma finished for him. Was never meant to reach the depot. Reed's gaze cut to her. Then where? Emma stepped deeper into the empty bay. Across the floor, faint scuff marks formed a pattern, not from crates, but from something small being dragged. Not cargo. Hardware. Carter stared at the tracks. You think they installed it inside one of the drivers? Not installed, Emma said. Tested. Holton's voice came through again. You need to see this. Base just registered an outbound link attempt through the uplink bypass. Someone tried to connect from ground-level transit to air range clearance. Carter's voice sharpened. From where? Holton hesitated. From the ridge beyond your position, 5 minutes ago. Emma stepped out of the hauler. They didn't send the implant to the depot. They sent it to a higher node. Carter's breath caught. What's higher than depot drone control? Reed already knew. Air traffic grid. Carter looked between them. They're going after the base's airborne command line. Emma's voice was low. No, they're going after what speaks above it. Holton came back over comms. Intercept Tower 9 just flagged a ghost ping on its network buffer. They thought it was a test loop, but it matched faded Ember code. Carter closed his eyes briefly. The blackout wasn't about taking comms down below. It's about taking comms above. Reed spoke without hesitation. Transport bay now. They moved fast. Rowan was conscious but pale. Dyer looked at her like she'd broken in front of him and he didn't know how to fix it. Reed spoke into his comm. Lock Tower 9. No uplink traffic in or out without my code. Holton confirmed. Done. But you need to get here now. If they breach Tower 9's uplink, they can reroute every drone, every satellite relay, every channel tagged to orbital clearance. Emma's pace never slowed. We knew Ember wasn't about shutting the lights off. Carter matched stride beside her. It was about redirecting them. Reed's silence carried agreement. They reached their tactical hauler and climbed back in. Emma took the wheel. The engine growled awake, wheels spitting loose gravel behind as the vehicle shot up the incline. The horizon was shifting, first glow of dawn bleeding into the sky, light without heat, a warning disguised as morning. Carter checked the uplink chatter. Tower 9's buffer is holding, but the ghost imprint is still pushing handshake requests. It's not random. Emma slowed only to angle around a jagged shelf of stone. It's not pushing, it's listening. Reed looked at her. For what? Emma didn't take her eyes off the path. For someone to answer. They tore across the ridge as the sun began slicing the dark into fragments. The base loomed ahead in the distance, lights still dimmed for night cycle. No alarms blared. No panic, just quiet. Too quiet. Carter checked his scrambler. If we cut uplink entirely, we isolate Tower 9, but then we cripple command transmission. Reed said, we don't cut it, we trap it. Emma angled the vehicle toward the East Service access, the one most personnel forgot existed. Tower 9 has a legacy buffer grid. We kill the modern link and route the breach into the old shell. Holton's voice crackled faintly. Legacy systems aren't connected to external clearance. Emma nodded. Exactly. Reed's jaw set. You'll isolate the breach in the shell, then what? Emma didn't answer immediately. Carter did, then we burn it. As they breached the outer perimeter road, the sun crested the horizon, turning the base walls gold for half a heartbeat. Not beautiful, exposed. Emma brought the hauler hard around the east wing and down toward Tower 9, an old relay spire used during the early years of the war, now mostly automated. 2 guards at the entrance signaled as they approached. Reed flashed override clearance, and the gates rolled back. They didn't park. Emma braked only long enough for Carter and Reed to jump out. She killed the engine and stepped out last. Holton met them at the entrance hatch, breath tight. The ghost probe embedded in the buffer keeps requesting authentication across multiple clearance levels. Carter asked, is it tied to Rowan? Holton shook his head. Negative. It decoupled before you pulled the drive. It's using a ghost thread in the convoy's departure code. Reed said, show us the legacy shell. Holton led them inside the tower. The elevator wasn't working. Old infrastructure too neglected to trust, so they took the maintenance stairs 2 at a time until they reached the relay deck. Inside, the room smelled of metal, ozone, and old dust. Thick cables ran through the floor grates and into a central terminal block that hadn't been powered in years. Holton pointed at a side console. That's where the ghost is requesting access. It's knocking on a door no one listens to anymore. Emma set her hand on the cold iron of the legacy shell. Then we make it think we opened it. Carter moved to a secondary board. I'll isolate the main grid. Reed stood near the entry, watching for anything outside ordinary movement. Holton keyed in a code sequence, bringing up minimal power across the shell. A faint hum stirred through the room, decades old and half asleep. The console flickered. A red glyph, almost identical to the one in the convoy cab, blinked once, then again, sensing the new channel. Carter stared. It sees us. Emma didn't look at the screen. It sees opportunity. Holton asked, when do we close it? Emma stepped to the hardware relay point at the base of the tower's old trunk. When it commits. Reed glanced at her. Time. Seconds, she said. The red thread on the console stretched, forming characters that weren't words but intent, structured, deliberate, confident. It wasn't just code. It was something that remembered. Carter whispered, it's embedding. Emma placed her hand on the manual breaker handle tied into the shell's ground line. Now. Holton pulled the kill switch. Emma yanked the breaker. Carter slammed the isolation gate. And the legacy shell lit up, not in sparks, but in white surge, like a quiet detonation of heat and memory. The console blinked once, twice, then went dead. Silence thudded into the room. Holton exhaled. It's gone. Carter checked the uplink buffer. Tower 9 is clean. No more handshake requests. Reed turned to Emma. Any chance it jumped? Emma stared at the dead console. If it did, we'll see the echo in 12 hours. Carter asked, and if we do? Emma finally looked away. Then that was the hand. Holton leaned against the wall, tension draining from his shoulders. You think that was the real strike? Emma's tone held a stillness deeper than silence. No, that was the reach. Rowan's voice filtered in faintly from the comm. She was in medical now, coherent but shaken. Am I compromised? Emma didn't answer the comm. She spoke to the room. You were used. That's not the same as being the weapon. Reed watched her, his eyes holding something most people missed. The weight of knowing this wasn't finished just because the air stopped humming. He said quietly, the story will be they stopped a breach. Carter added, the report will say the base never went dark. Holton gave a short, tired laugh. They'll bury it again, won't they? Emma didn't look at any of them when she said, let them bury it. Reed nodded once. They buried Ember last time too. Emma finally turned toward the dead console. Ember wasn't the blackout, it was the warning. Reed asked, and this? Emma's voice was steady. This was the reminder. Holton stepped forward, voice low. So what now? Emma brushed a faint smear of dust from the edge of the dead screen. Now we wait for whoever expected silence to mean success. Carter sank onto a crate. You think they'll try again with someone else? Emma looked at him. Someone else is already waiting. They just don't know they're carrying it yet. Reed's gaze followed hers across the room, across the base, across the horizon that had just swallowed the last of the night. The first alarms of morning began to sound across the compound. Not warnings, just shifts beginning, drills starting, routine waking up as if nothing had come within a breath of rewriting it. Holton exhaled, voice quieter now. Feels like we fought a war no one saw. Emma didn't respond. Reed did. They'll never know how close it came. Emma stepped toward the exit. They don't need to. Carter asked almost to himself, then who will? Emma paused at the door, her silhouette cut by the rising light. The ones who learn to hear what silence is hiding. She walked out first. Reed followed. Carter stayed a breath longer, as if trying to understand what it meant to survive something no one believed existed. Outside, the wind carried dust across the ground. The sun broke the ridge line, slow and unceremonious. And the base kept moving, unaware that its blood had nearly been rewritten. Some battles don't leave wreckage. Some victories don't announce themselves. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.